This is class 130 on the Golden Doves. Um, Sorry for the noise in the background. That's a river or a brook. But let's do this class because I do want to cover some ground. So we were on page 73. We were discussing the term ism, which is, I guess, the equivalent in English would be the signifier, right? And we discussed how in Harambam, the word ism or the idea of signifier can refer to different things. So we did that in the previous class. Never get a deal, and that's or shalach, right? So ism and shalach, and now we're going to deal with a ma'ana. So ma'ana is both epistemologically and ontologically valid. It's interesting. So one of the things that Jack Derrida discusses in of gravitology. So let's take a step back. Actually, Saussure, he discusses the arbitrariness of the sign, and you remember we discussed that in the previous classes, how the signifiers, words we use, are arbitrary. And then there was a discussion how perhaps the word arbitrary isn't the best term because that really arbitrary, it's not completely arbitrary. So maybe it's conventional, which is peshat, right? So we discussed that. And what Jack Derrida does in Of Grammatology, which is a book on the rules of writing, right? So you have grammar, the rules of language, grammatology, the rules of writing. Anyway, what he does there is he points out how there's a certain arbitrariness as well to the signified, right? Which is to say that the way we structure the world in our mind, that itself is arbitrary, right? So it's not just a signifier, but it's also the signified that's arbitrary. Now, it's an interesting thing. Again, I'm using the word arbitrary. I don't think he used that word, not to mention he wrote it in French. But the point is, there are certain structures that we use to understand the world. So we structure the world in a certain way, right? And we call this reality, right? So ma'ana. So now the meaning, ma'ana is the meaning of the message being conveyed, right? There's a certain message being conveyed. So when I speak to you, you want to understand the message. You don't necessarily remember every single word that I spoke, but hopefully you understood the message. Ma'ana is both epistemologically and ontologically valid. So by epistemologically valid, what he means to say is that there's a message being conveyed, so I'm thinking about this message. And once I convey the message, hopefully you can understand it in your mind. It's the way I understood it in my mind. Maybe not identically, but you'll understand it. So there's a certain epistemology to ma'ana. There's a message that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to give you in Yirmiyah HaNavi, right? So there is an actual, let's call it, a reality to that message, right? There is something that wants to be conveyed. That's number one. But then there's an ontological aspect to the message. The message is describing, so outside of the mind of the first person who speaks the message and the mind of the second person who receives the message, there is the actual message and how it correlates to the world outside of the minds of these speakers, right? So there's a world, right? So, right? There is an actual ra'ah that ends up coming from the safon, right? So there's a correlation between the ma'ana, the mind, the speaker, and what actually takes place. So it's both epistemologically and ontologically valid. Misafon tepetach hara'ah, and indeed, Misafon became Melech Bavel and Vayasar al Yerushalayim, right? On the one hand, it originates in the intellect, right? So it starts with the thought, I'm thinking something now. I just thought something very beautiful over there, the trees with the, with the lighting of the sun beginning to, or the blue sky in the background, right? I was thinking that, I just conveyed that message to you. That's akil, intellect. Or maybe a more intelligent thought, like the artistry of God, that's beautiful. Wow, look at how HaKadosh Baruch Hu paints, right? And can only be grasped by it, right? That was an intellectual message that I just conveyed to you, and you need your mind to grasp that intellectual message. I need coffee. I didn't get my coffee. I have a coffee machine at home where I make delicious espressos, and I didn't get it, so I apologize for any mistakes I may have made in this class. More precisely, the akil is nothing but the ma'ana when actually understood. So what is the akil? That's the intellectual, right? So the intellectual aspect of the message is what I'm thinking. But if I succeed in transmitting the ma'ana to you, then the akil is in your mind, right? If it's properly understood. If you didn't understand me, then no. On the other hand, the referent of ma'ana is objective reality, right? The same way the signifier refers to the signified, right? Or the ism refers to the object. The mana refers to a concept, but that concept hopefully is grounded in reality, so it could be an actual thing out there. So the referent of mana is objective reality, which is not a linguistic category, right? Mana is related to the surah, inner form of things. Surat Hadavad V'Ta'oro, says Rambam in the first chapter or the first part of the Moreh Nebuchim. So what is, so you have Surat Hadavad. So Surat Hadavad means the inner form. I believe that perhaps the word Selem would have been the better word here. I'm not sure why my father chose the word Surah. Right? Let me think about that. Maybe it'll come to me as I'm reading this, right? But the point is there is an inner form, right? So there's an inner form to water. The inner form to water is, the two hydrogen atoms which are attached to that one oxygen atom. And the reason they're attached is because the hydrogen atom, I guess, has one electron in its outer shell. It only has one electron. And what is oxygen? Oxygen is 8. So it must be missing an electron there. And because it's missing an electron in the covalent shell, I hope I'm saying that right, but there is some attraction, and if I was able to convey that attraction properly, I would be giving you the inner surah. Let's assume for purposes of the discussion that there can be an additional electron in the outer shell of the oxygen atom, and because of that, the hydrogen atom, or actually it's missing 2 electrons, and therefore 2 hydrogen atoms, which have 2 electrons, will fill that shell. I wish I studied, looked at the periodic table before giving this class. But the point is, what I describe now is the surah. It could be that I was imprecise in my description, but I'm trying to convey to you the idea that there is an inner form, an inner structure to things. Also, for example, if I look at a particular tree, there is an inner form. That inner form is conveyed by the genetic code of that tree, right? So that inner form, that's the plan, right? By the way, one of the things that really evolutionary science fails to properly address is, why is there a plan? I understand that coincidentally, if I have a mound of dirt and the wind blows and eventually it'll shape it and it'll look like a nose. Okay, fine, no problem. It's not a nose. A nose has a plan, right? An eye has a plan, meaning there's a plan for the design of the eye, right? So the idea of Selem is a very profound idea. We don't think in terms of Selem, we think in terms of external forms and shapes, right? So that's Surat. So Mana is related to the Surah, the inner form of things, right? The Surah is the Mana through which a thing becomes and is what it is, right? Right? Shenit asem oto hadavar, right? So how does the thing become what it is? So let's talk about that. How do things become what it is? How does this chair become what it is? Right? So this chair, there's a chair here, this chair, you see it? Well, somebody planned it, somebody thought in their mind, this chair should be made out of certain material. It should have a certain size. The material should be strong enough to lift or to hold a person of a particular weight. The chair should be of a particular height from the ground so as to create a particular comfort, right? There's a design. That design is what gives the chair its essence. Again, evolution is dismal. And I'm sorry, but it's like I would say evolution is almost as pathetic as politicians speaking and trying to convince us of what they're saying. I mean, right? I don't know which is at a lower intellectual level, the politicians or the scientists talking about evolution. So again, you have here, a shape. It's not just have this, lightning struck and eventually the wood got, messed up and it got put back together again. But that's a pathetic and lazy explanation, because the question is not the chair. The question is the design of the chair. Where did the design come from? And you see so many of these chairs, right? Was there a design, right? Or no design? I mean, there's a design. You see a blueprint, right? So the idea of mana has to do with that, the design, the inner structure. Unlike the sharaf, which is defined in linguistic terms alone, the mana refers to and is defined by objective reality. Now, because lexical meaning of words, sharaf, doesn't align with objective reality, right? It just says this word means that, this word means the other word means something else, right? Right? It's not conveying something about reality. The mana attempts to convey something about the world out there. The sharaf is focused on the actual word. What does this word mean? This word means this and this and this and this. Assuming it's a homonym, right? The mana has to do with not what does a word mean, something about the world out there. Therefore, they cannot be. And something my father uses the word objective reality. I wonder if he disagreed with Derrida. But again, Derrida, he almost goes to the point where he says that there is no objective reality and everything is, everything is a mental construct. I don't think my father goes so far as to say that everything is a mental construct, because here he uses the word objective reality. So interesting. There is some world out there that we can objectify. It may be true that the way we objectify that world is structured by inner structures of our mind, but it doesn't mean that there is no objectifiable, maybe the better word is an objectifiable reality. See what I'm saying? So there is an objectifiable reality which our mind interacts with and structures and organizes, but that reality is an objectifiable reality. I think in the thinking of Jack Derrida, I think he takes it to a certain extreme where it just doesn't matter. So, I'll deconstruct the mental binaries, and then once I deconstruct the mental binaries, I can reach certain conclusions about the world, which are vastly different than what most people say. Okay, I'm going to reserve my judgment on Derrida before, but I think certainly my father's thinking, he refers to the objective reality, or perhaps objectifiable reality. Therefore, they cannot be equally apprehended. So again, unlike the sharaf, which is defined in linguistic terms alone, the mana refers to and is defined by objective reality. Therefore, they cannot be equally apprehended. It is imperative to grasp, right, the ma'ani, plural of ma'ana, according to their truth. That is, they ought to be understood through intellectual perception, right? So to understand that a cat, the word cat refers to that cat, I got it, that's easy. That's also an aborigine can think like that, right? Banana, give me banana, I want banana, right? But you want to go into the ma'ana of things, right? The meaning of things. What do they point out to? What is the inner form and structure? Where's the design? What does this all mean? This ma'ana. Right. So you need intellectual perception. They must be abstracted from language, and in order to get that intellectual perception, first person speaking to a second person, you have to abstract the ideas from language. Meaning you need words to point out to these abstractions. And should not be understood according to the generalities indicated by language. Because all language can do is give you a general sense. It can point out towards, but it's not that. So there has to be some sort of intellectual leap on the part of the second person to understand the first person. And indeed, that just could be part of a common vocabulary. But nevertheless, the intellectual leap has to happen. Words do not equal the message conveyed by the words, right? A word at the lexical meaning, at the lexical level, can equal whatever it is that the word wants to equal.